Hello, welcome to Whiskey Alpha Pilot. My name's Wayne, and today I'm going to talk about some of the apps that I've been using whilst I've been learning to fly. Apps are something that are very important to some students, and some students just hate using them, but we all have modern mobile phones these days, and apps are something that they exist to try and help us. First two apps I'm going to talk about are the two that I used for a lot of my training in terms of the theory side of things. The first is something called PPL Tutor. Now, PPL Tutor, if I open it up, as you can see, it gives you air law, operational procedures, human performance. Basically, it is split into all the exams that you need for your PPL under each individual subject. So air law, for instance, we have an option for revise, an option to do mark and go, so you can actually put your answers in and test them, and a timed system that allows you to simulate doing the actual exam. Now, all the PPL exams are now online. There's no paper PPL exams. A lot of the original question banks have now all been changed. So you have to be a little bit wary of apps that use question banking to actually give you the answers, because they're not going to be exactly what you see in the exam. But the point is, if you know the subject and if you understand the subject, you should be able to answer any question on it, rather than just learning the individual questions and the answers. So if you're trying to learn the questions and the answers from the question bank, not a great idea. Learn the subject. That's the general idea. The second app that I've been using for training is something called Radio Exam Tutor, and surprisingly enough, it's about radio calls. So if I open up the app, so Radio Exam Tutor again gives you some options. So one of the options it gives you is to practice calls. So we'll select practice calls, and let's select a zone transit. It gives you the basic premise of what you're trying to do, and then gives you little tick boxes to choose what you're going to start your radio call with. Cardiff radar, blah de blah de blah, end radio transmission. I'm going to put a few random ones in, and then it will give you the results, picking up what you did wrong and picking up the things that you did right. One issue with doing radio calls using an app is you don't have any interference, and it's a little bit artificial, but it does give you a bit of practice as to the exact structure of certain radio calls. Now, the next apps I've been using are two rather important ones that allow you to assess something that's very important to pilots, and that is the weather. Now, officially we have to use Met Office data, Form 214, 215, but using apps gives you a little bit more information in terms of forecasting and helps in terms of decoding METARs and TAFs. Although as a pilot and a student, you should be able to decode METARs and TAFs without an issue. So the first app I use is something called Windy. Select Windy on my phone. Now, Windy is an app that is designed for general meteorological forecasting, so it covers a lot of uses. Some of the options tend to be more related to other sports like sailing or just general out and out walking, but there are a number of options within Windy which are very useful for pilots. One thing it does do is give you lots of wind information, so as you can see, it's windy. If I select some menu options, I can get details of cloud base. Green is reasonably high cloud base. One thing you have to realise with all of these systems is they're using modelling for forecasting, which means at certain points in time they're going to fail. One thing about the weather in general is the fact that just because you have a forecast, it doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're going to get. The other meteorological app I use is something called AeroWeather. AeroWeather is designed more specifically for aeronautical applications, hence the name. Basically what it does is it decodes METARs and TAFs from your local aerodromes and provides them in quite a nice graphical format. Next on the list of applications is something that, as a pilot, you'll find unbelievably useful, and as a student pilot, it certainly helps with planning and certain aspects of navigation. The thing is, as a student pilot, good old CAA still requires to use one of these and all the other ancillary rulers and bits and pieces to do our navigation. However, the geniuses at SkyDemon have created SkyDemon. By the way, I'm not sponsored by SkyDemon. SkyDemon is basically a navigation app for general aviation. It covers your flight planning, it covers general navigation, it'll pick up NOTAMs, it'll pick up weather. It is unbelievably useful. It's actually quite difficult to pick every single possible option that it has. Once you get to use it, you'll start to understand how powerful it can be. As a student, you have to use traditional charts and rulers and protractors to do your navigation. However, you can use SkyDemon to do your pre-planning and also pick up things like weather and NOTAMs, etc., providing you still use the traditional techniques when you actually go flying. One of the more powerful elements of SkyDemon is it will also interface to GPS, and you can use it to record your flights. So the option is to switch SkyDemon on whilst you're in the plane, stick it into a pocket in the aircraft, fly your flight, land, turn SkyDemon off, and now you have a record of what you actually flew. Always useful to be able to go back and look at what you've done. Now, use of SkyDemon is way beyond this short little video, so if you want to know how to use it, simple answer is go and type SkyDemon into YouTube and there'll be enormous numbers of videos, but it is something I highly recommend. The next app I've been using is something that helps to replace this. This is a WizWheel, also known as a Dalton computer, and it is used to calculate functions and values like fuel consumption, fuel weight, etc., etc. Students learn to hate this mainly because it's a circular slide rule and it's been around for probably 60 or 70 years, and on the back is the wind bit, which really I hated when I was trying to use it. And now the wind comes and spoils my recording. Who cares, I'll carry on. So the app is called My E6B. It gives you enormous amounts of aviation calculations. It's effectively an aviating calculator. Everything from time, speed and distance, fuel calculations, altitude calculations, effects of wind, various weather, unit conversions, etc., etc., etc. In fact, if it isn't in this app, then you probably don't need to understand it or know how to use it. The next app I've been using is something that supplements what we all do as pilots, and that is logbooks. Now, I still have a traditional paper logbook, always useful there as a backup, but I now have an app called SafeLog, which allows me to bring all of my logbook entries into an electronic format. Guess what? We're coming into the 22nd century, or is it 21st? I never remember. Basically, it's an electronic logbook. So I can log flights, I can view my logbook, I can see various graphs, I can see what I've flown recently, and lots of options. It works across all my devices, and it also has a web interface. So I've got that element of, if I need to access to my logbooks, I can get them from anywhere. I don't necessarily have to have the paper copy. It's also capable of producing printouts, which can be sent to the CAA and various other organisations. Nearly at the end of the list, two more applications. One, which virtually every pilot on the planet probably uses, Flight Radar 24. Flight Radar 24 is an app that uses various radar signals to provide you with a list of aircraft flying around and where they're going and where they've been. And how do you spot a pilot? Every time they see an aircraft in the sky, they'll grab their phone, they'll sit there with Flight Radar and tell you where that plane's been, where it's going, what height it's at. Don't believe me? Just go down to your local airfield and watch. That's about it for apps. The only other one that I haven't really mentioned is something that most student pilots probably are using, and that is some form of flight simulator. Generally, they tend not to be ones that operate on phones, because none of us fly an aircraft like this, but having some form of flight simulator at home sometimes does help, particularly when it comes to navigation phases and some of the more procedural systems that we go through. The two common ones tend to be X-Plane and Microsoft Flight Sim. That just about rounds up some of the apps that I've been using as student pilot. Hopefully some of the information here has given you some ideas and has helped in general. If you like what I'm doing, please consider giving me a thumbs up, and don't forget you can subscribe to the channel. It's always great to have new subscribers, and if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below. I do read them all and I will try to reply to as many as I can. Anyway, thanks for watching, be safe, have fun. Bye.